My name is Nathan. I'm 31 years old, and I live in a small mountain town in Colorado where the mornings smell like pine and the nights are quiet enough to hear owls calling through the trees. I'm a mechanical engineer by trade, the kind of person who likes order, structure, and routines. Always have. I eat the same breakfast every morning. I keep my tools hung in perfect alignment on my garage wall, and I've used the same brand of boots since college. I married Elise 8 years ago. We met on a hiking retreat organized by some environmental nonprofit I donated to once and then got put on a mailing list. She was the loud one in the group, the kind of person who laughed too easily and always seemed to be in motion. I remember watching her talk to a stranger on the trail like they were old friends, and I remember thinking, I'd never do that. Then somehow, by the end of that weekend, she was walking beside me, asking me 100 questions, challenging me on my favorite movies, calling me Mountain Man, even though she was the one clambering up rocks and trail runners like she'd been born outdoors. I thought it wouldn't last. She was too bright, too spontaneous. I like things simple, quiet, but somehow we fit. Her boldness softened around my logic, and my silence didn't scare her off. She used to say I made her feel grounded. I used to say she made the world seem less sharp around the edges. We dated slowly. No drama, no huge fights. Just long walks, shared playlists, and quiet evenings at the cabin I was renting back then. We got married 3 years after that first hike, small ceremony by a lake, just our closest friends, a borrowed Bluetooth speaker, and a lemon cake her aunt made from scratch. She wore hiking boots under her dress. I still have the photo of us barefoot in the water, her veil caught in the breeze like something out of a magazine. After the wedding, we bought a modest A-frame on the edge of town. Nothing fancy, just enough space for the two of us and the future we were planning. Elise worked at the local arts co-op, teaching classes and selling her pottery. She'd come home with clay under her nails and stories about teenagers who didn't know how to center a wheel. She loved it, the chaos, the color, the people. But a couple years in, she told me she wanted to leave the co-op and focus on making a home. Said she wanted to slow down, maybe prepare for kids. We talked about it before, not with urgency, but always with certainty. It wasn't a question of if, just when. So I didn't push back. I just adjusted the budget, picked up some extra freelance drafting work on the side, and made sure the insurance covered prenatal care when the time came. And Elise? She turned the cabin into something out of a catalog. Mismatched mugs, dried herbs hanging from the kitchen beam, thrifted curtains that somehow looked expensive. She baked, read a lot, got really into herbal teas for a while. I'd come home to the smell of cinnamon or fresh bread, and we'd sit on the porch in the evenings and talk about baby names and which room would be the nursery. It wasn't thrilling, maybe, not in the movie way, but it was ours. Intentional, steady. I thought, genuinely thought, that we were building something unshakable. Sometimes I'd catch her staring off into the woods, quiet like she was listening for something. I'd ask what she was thinking, and she'd always say the same thing. Nothing. Just peaceful. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? Looking back now, I think I misunderstood peace. Thought it meant everything was fine. That our quiet life was enough. That the plans we made, the ones we hadn't even started yet, were enough to hold us in place. Turns out, sometimes things don't break all at once. Sometimes they drift, slowly, silently, until you look up one day and realize the person you love is already somewhere else. It started with a truck, an old, red Tacoma with a mountain bike strapped to the back and a bumper sticker that said, "Take only memories, leave only footprints." I remember watching it rumble past our cabin window one Saturday morning as I poured coffee. Elise leaned over the sink, squinting. "New neighbor?" she asked. "Looks like it," I said, not thinking much of it. The house down the hill had been empty for months. Some out-of-state couple owned it as a vacation rental, but they'd barely used it. Later that afternoon, I was changing the oil on the generator behind the shed when Elise came around the corner with her phone in one hand and a plate of muffins in the other. "Going to say hi," she said, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Brought these. You baked." She grinned. "I had extras. And it's neighborly." I wiped my hands on a rag and stood. "Want me to come?" "Nah," she said, already halfway down the trail. "I won't be long." It wasn't a big deal. Elise was friendly with everyone. She'd once invited a traveling banjo player into our kitchen because he seemed interesting. But something about the way she smoothed her hair before she left, how she checked her reflection in the window, stayed with me longer than I admitted. His name was Carter. 28, maybe 30. Worked as a wilderness guide for some outfit in town that took tourists rock climbing and rafting. He had that wild, windblown look, tan arms, that kind of scruffy beard that looks good on magazine covers. He laughed loudly, shirtless more often than not. The kind of guy who made you feel like life should always be lived barefoot and sunburnt. I met him 2 days later. He was jogging past our driveway when Elise waved him down. She introduced us like we were neighbors meeting at a potluck. "Hey, man," he said, sticking out his hand. "Carter. Nice to meet you." His grip was too firm, his smile too easy. I shook his hand, nodded, and said something polite. I can't remember what. Something about the weather, probably. After that, he was around a lot. Not in a way that felt aggressive. Just present. Jogging past while Elise watered the garden. Chopping firewood shirtless in his yard with music playing from a speaker clipped to his belt. He and Elise started chatting more, little porch conversations that I mostly ignored. At first. Then came the muffins again. Banana this time. He helped me lift that planter box I was struggling with, she said when I raised an eyebrow. "And that deserves baked goods?" She laughed. "You're so suspicious." "It's just a thank you." I nodded and went back to grading a blueprint. But the thought stayed with me longer than it should have. A few days later, I noticed she was checking the mailbox at odd times. Times when Carter was usually outside. Once, I caught them talking at the edge of the driveway, both laughing at something. When she came back in, I asked what was so funny. She blinked, then said, "Oh, nothing. Just neighborhood stuff." Neighborhood stuff. The next week, she went for a jog. Elise hadn't jogged in almost a year. Said she preferred hiking, that jogging felt too mechanical. But suddenly she was lacing up new trail runners and setting an alarm for 7 a.m. When I asked if she wanted company, she smiled and said she needed solo time. Except she never left at 7 a.m. She left at 7:20, the same time Carter usually ran past our mailbox. One morning, I watched them through the window. They didn't jog together exactly, but their routes overlapped for just long enough. He slowed down when he passed her. She smiled like she hadn't smiled in a while. Later that day, I found a new windbreaker hanging on the coat rack. Bright blue, not Elise's usual style. The tags were still on. "You get a new jacket?" I asked. She looked up from her tea. "Yeah. Carter said this brand holds up in the rain better." There was no malice in her voice. No guilt, no nervousness. Just casual mention, like Carter was a family friend and not a stranger we'd known for 2 weeks. I told myself not to read into it. Elise was social. I was the quiet one. That was always our dynamic. I didn't want to become the paranoid husband, the guy who made things out of nothing. But that night, lying next to her in bed, I stared at the ceiling for a long time. Her breathing evened out beside me. I listened to the rhythm of it, steady and calm, and wondered if I was imagining things. If I was just being insecure. I wanted to believe that. I needed to, because nothing had really happened. Not yet. Just muffins and smiles and casual new gear. Just a man with loud laughter and tan arms and a habit of being where she happened to be. Nothing. Just enough nothing to make me feel like a fool for noticing. It started with the phone. One night, I came in from the garage. I'd been organizing drill bits, and Elise was on the couch, curled up under a blanket, her phone glowing in her hands. The second I stepped into the room, she flipped it over and smiled like nothing had happened. "Hey," she said, casually, but I heard the change in her tone. Like her voice got lighter on purpose. I stood there for a second. "What were you looking at?" She shrugged. "Just scrolling." But she didn't turn the phone back over. She tucked it under her leg and changed the subject. Asked what I wanted for dinner. Told me there was soup in the fridge. That was the first time. The second time, it was even more obvious. I walked in after work a little earlier than usual, and she was sitting at the kitchen table with her phone in one hand and her thumb moving fast, typing. Really fast. She didn't hear me come in. But the second I said her name, she jolted like I'd slapped the table. Again, the phone flipped over. "You scared me," she said, laughing a little too loud. "Didn't mean to," I said, setting my keys down. I walked behind her, glanced at the screen before it went dark. I only saw the edge of a conversation, a name in bold. Carter. No last name. Just Carter and a half-finished sentence. "Haha, yeah, before the screen dimmed. I didn't say anything. Just nodded, kissed the top of her head, and grabbed a beer from the fridge. My throat felt dry. I stood there, staring out the window, the bottle cold in my hand. The next couple of days, I started watching more closely. She started keeping her phone face down. Even at night, on the nightstand. Her screen notifications used to light up with texts from her sister, random Pinterest alerts, weather apps. Now, Nothing. Total silence. She even set up a lock screen, something we'd never bothered with before. She started humming around the house again, like she used to when we first moved in. But it wasn't a relaxed hum. It was bright and performative, like she was trying to seem like her usual self. Like she knew I was watching and wanted to give me something easy to believe in. At dinner, she talked more, mostly about random things. How the mailman had a new mustache. How the neighbor's dog kept getting into our compost. But then Carter would slip in. Carter said that brand of trail mix has too much sodium, she'd mention, passing me a plate. Or, Carter's taking a group up the Devil's Ridge next weekend. Said the trail's half melted but still gorgeous. Always just enough context to make it sound like small talk. But the name started feeling like a splinter under my skin. I found myself checking her social media while she was in the shower. I'm not proud of it. I never used to be that guy. But I needed to see. Needed to know I wasn't crazy. She hadn't posted anything about him. But in her DMs, I saw the notification pop up once when her phone lit up. His name was there. Bolded. New message. I never read them. I never opened her phone. But the shape of it, the secrecy, it was enough. I started pulling away. Not on purpose, not at first. I just went quiet. Ate slower. Stayed at work later. I told her the turbine testing project was running long. That I needed to finish up a design. She didn't question it. Some nights I sat in my truck outside the cabin and just stared at the porch light, wondering if she'd notice how long I'd been gone. She didn't ask. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Maybe I didn't want to hear the answer. Maybe I was hoping it would all just fade if I ignored it long enough. But the silence between us kept growing. Not loud, not angry, just stretched thin. She still kissed my cheek in the morning. Still asked if I wanted seconds at dinner. But her eyes didn't linger on mine anymore. Her body was there, but her mind was off somewhere else. Somewhere I couldn't follow. I stopped mentioning Carter altogether. Stopped asking about her runs. Stopped looking out the window when I heard footsteps on the trail. I told myself I was just giving her space. That couples go through dry spells. That maybe I was imagining things. But deep down, I knew. You don't flip your phone screen over because of a coincidence. You don't hide a smile that wasn't meant for the person in the room unless it came from someone else entirely. I wasn't the jealous type. But I wasn't blind either. It was a Wednesday evening. Cold outside, fire going inside. The kind of night we usually spent watching old movies and splitting a blanket. Elise made chili. She hummed while she stirred the pot, like everything was fine. I should have known something was coming. She'd been too cheerful all week, smiling at nothing, folding laundry like she was in a commercial. But her eyes were wrong, a little too bright, like someone trying to distract from a bruise. We ate in near silence. She asked how work was. I gave the usual answers. She nodded too eagerly. At one point, she looked like she was about to say something but didn't. It happened when I was washing dishes. She came up behind me, towel in her hands, but not drying anything, just holding it. I turned off the water when I felt her standing there. We need to talk, she said. My stomach tightened. I dried my hands slowly. Okay, I said, turning around. What about? She took a breath like she was about to confess to a crime, then looked me dead in the eye. I have feelings for Carter. The words didn't even echo. They just landed. Flat. Heavy. I didn't move. Didn't speak. Just stood there, watching the steam rise from the sink. I didn't plan for it, she rushed on. It just happened. I didn't cheat. Not physically. But I can't stop thinking about him, and it's not fair to you. Still, I said nothing. I need space, she added. Time to think. To clear my head. I swallowed. What does that mean exactly? I want to stay with him, she said. Just for a few weeks. Not like that, not in a romantic way. I just need distance from here. To figure out what I want. I stared at her. She stood there in her old hoodie, hair tied back, face flushed. Not guilty. Not sad. Just expectant. Like I was supposed to nod and say I understood. Like this was normal. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. Okay, I said. Her eyebrows lifted a little. Okay. You want to stay with Carter, I repeated. To sort out your feelings. She nodded slowly. All right, I said, moving past her toward the living room. I'll pack a bag for you. That caught her off guard. Wait, you're not going to argue? Or stop me? I sat down, picked up the remote, and turned the volume down on the muted TV. Why would I? Because this is our marriage, she said, stepping closer. Because I thought you'd be upset. I gave a short, humorless laugh. I am upset, Elise. But you made your decision. You want space? You've got it. She blinked, like she hadn't expected me to be calm. Like she was hoping for drama. A fight she could twist into justification. You really don't care, she said. No, I said, looking her in the eye. I care. I just stopped begging for people to choose me. That silenced her. She stood there for a moment, towel still clutched in both hands like it was keeping her upright. Then she nodded, slowly, stiffly, and walked upstairs. I sat on the couch, staring at the fire, feeling like I was watching my own life happen from the outside. A few hours later, I heard her suitcase rolling down the hallway. She didn't cry, didn't say goodbye, just opened the door, took one last look at the place we built together, and left. I didn't follow. That night, I stood in the kitchen, staring at the half-eaten chili on the stove. The same stove where we made pancakes every Sunday. The same one where she once accidentally caught a potholder on fire and we laughed about it for a week. And now? Now it felt like I was standing in someone else's house. I didn't sleep. Just sat up at the kitchen table with a notebook, making a list. Budget adjustments. Legal contacts. Bank logins. Not because I was thinking about survival. I'd be fine. I was thinking about separation. About how much time I'd already wasted being someone's second choice. And how I wasn't going to do it anymore. The day after Elise left, I went to work an hour early. No real reason. I just couldn't sit in the cabin with that kind of quiet. It wasn't peaceful anymore. It was sharp. Every creak in the floor sounded like a memory trying to pull me backward. So I showed up at the machinery lab, clocked in, and kept my head down. I stayed late too. Started volunteering for field assignments, the kind of jobs other guys passed on because they meant more time on the road or more hours on site. I didn't care. Work made sense. Machines either worked or they didn't. Bolts tightened, gears turned, blueprints lined up. Predictable. Safe. I stopped checking my phone so often. Elise didn't text. Didn't call. I didn't expect her to. Whatever she thought she was doing with Carter, she seemed committed to giving it room. And I wasn't going to chase someone who left without a fight. The first weekend after she left, I laced up my boots and hiked alone. First time in years. No trail talk. No shared snacks. No Elise stopping to sketch a leaf or photograph moss on a rock. Just me and the sound of gravel underfoot. I thought I'd feel lonely. I didn't. I felt steady. I knew every bend in the trail, every spot where the trees thinned and the light broke through. The silence was different out there. Not empty, just mine. People started asking questions. My buddy Darren at work. Everything good at home? Yeah, I lied. Just busy. My neighbor, Mrs. Aldridge, haven't seen Elise in a while. She's visiting a friend, I said, which technically wasn't wrong. Just left out the part where the friend was a shirtless wilderness guide, and the visit had no return date. I didn't know anyone the details. Not yet. But eventually, I needed to tell someone. So I drove out to my dad's place. He's a retired park ranger, still lives in the same cabin where I grew up. I found him out back splitting wood like it was 60 degrees instead of 30. He barely looked up when I walked up. Grab a beer from the cooler, he said. We didn't talk until we were both sitting on the porch, watching the wind tug at the treetops. Elise left? I said after a while. He didn't flinch. You two fight. She's staying with someone else. Says she needs clarity. He nodded slowly, then took a sip from his bottle. You gonna wait for her? I stared at the tree lean. I don't think so. Good, he said, no hesitation. That surprised me. I looked over at him. No advice about holding on or working through it. He shook his head. Son, some people take love and stretch it out like it's elastic. See how far they can pull it without it snapping. That's not love. That's convenience. If she needed to leave to figure out if she still wants you, she already knows the answer. I didn't say anything for a long time. Don't wait around, he added. Don't waste years hoping someone comes back different. That night, I opened my laptop and found the number for a divorce attorney in Boulder. Quiet guy, specialized in amicable separations, the kind that don't need shouting matches or courtroom drama. I didn't tell Elise. Not yet. First, I gathered everything, account statements, mortgage info, joint insurance policies. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted out with my dignity intact. The rebuild wasn't loud. There was no dramatic makeover or bold new life plan. It was simple. Focus. Discipline. Clear lines between what I could control and what I couldn't. I filled my days with steel and schematics. I filled my nights with books I'd never finished and music I hadn't played in years. And when I lay down in our bed, now just mine, I didn't cry. I just breathed. Long, slow breaths. Because little by little, The ache was being replaced by something I hadn't felt in a long time. Freedom. The cabin got quieter once I stopped waiting. At first, her absence echoed in the way the kettle didn't whistle at 7:15, in the missing thud of her slippers across the wood floor. But after a couple weeks, that same silence started to feel like space instead of a void. No more tiptoeing around tension. No more wondering if she was checking her phone under the covers. No more pretending I didn't hear Carter's name carried into our home like pollen on the breeze. Now, I drank my morning coffee without forced conversation. I left my socks on the floor if I felt like it. I played music from high school, the kind Elise used to call noise, and let it run loud through the speakers. It wasn't joy. Not yet. But it wasn't grief anymore, either. Just breath. The neighbors noticed, though. A few folks started mentioning things in passing. I was at the feed store when old Jim, the guy who sells firewood down the road, leaned against the counter and said, "Saw Elise in town. With that Carter fella. Real friendly, those two." I just nodded. "How's your truck running, Jim?" He got the hint and didn't bring it up again. A week later, Mrs. Aldridge mentioned Elise while I was fixing the fence. "She's been around," she said, wiping her hands on her apron, laughing a lot. "But I don't know. She doesn't look happy." Not really. I didn't ask for more. Didn't need it. Word around town said they were always together. Grocery runs, coffee stops, even a paddleboarding event at the lake. Elise never used to care about paddleboarding. But apparently now she wore a two-piece and laughed like it was all effortless. But some folks said her smile didn't reach her eyes. That she clung to Carter's arm like someone who didn't know what else to do with herself. That she looked distracted. I stopped going into town as often. Not out of avoidance, more out of preservation. I didn't want updates. Didn't need snapshots of her new chapter. This was my quiet season. In the evenings, I sat on the porch with tea and a blanket, watching the shadows move across the pines. Sometimes I brought out my old sketchbook. Just lines and shapes. Nothing to show anyone. Just something for me. I cleaned out her garden, the raised bed she once filled with kale and sunflowers. I tore them down. Planted grass. It wasn't spiteful. Just practical. The deer had already chewed through half the stuff anyway. Every time I stepped inside the house, I reminded myself, this was mine now. My home. My decisions. My peace. One night, I found one of her sweaters in the closet. The gray one with the thumb holes. I held it for a second, then tossed it in a box with the other leftovers, a scarf, a chipped mug, a pair of rain boots she left by the door. I taped the box shut and left it in the garage. Not for her. For me. I didn't need her to come back. And if she did, well, I already knew I wasn't going to open that door. It had been just over a month when Elise came back. No warning. No call. Just the crunch of tires on gravel one Sunday afternoon while I was oiling the hinges on the back gate. I stood up, wiping my hands on a rag, and watched her Subaru crawl up the driveway like it still belonged. And there she was, stepping out like nothing had happened. Aviators, cropped jacket, hair pulled back into a braid I'd never seen her wear before. She looked confident, like someone returning from a yoga retreat with clarity and purpose. "Nathan," she said with a small smile, like we were bumping into each other at the store. I didn't smile back. I just nodded once. "Elise." She glanced around the yard like she was trying to gauge how much had changed. Her eyes landed on the missing garden beds. Her mouth twitched, but she didn't say anything. "Can we talk?" she asked, stepping closer. "Inside?" I didn't answer. I just turned and walked into the cabin, leaving the door open behind me. She followed. Inside, she looked around the room like she was re-entering an old memory. Her hand skimmed the back of the couch, the way it used to when she was nervous. But her voice was casual, even upbeat. "I've been thinking a lot," she said, setting her purse down on the entryway bench. "About us. About everything." I stood near the kitchen counter, arms crossed. "Have you?" "I know I hurt you," she continued, tilting her head. "And I'm not proud of how I handled things. But I needed that time. I needed to see what I really wanted." She looked at me now, full eye contact. "And it's not Carter." I didn't flinch. I didn't ask why. She went on, undeterred. "It turns out, the grass isn't greener. It's just louder. He's not what I thought. And I realized I've been chasing something that doesn't even make sense. What we had, Nathan, it was real. It was safe and warm and steady. I miss that. Still, I said nothing. She took a step closer. "I'm ready to work on us. To come home. If you'll have me." That's when I moved. I reached into the drawer by the counter and pulled out a manila envelope. Walked it across the room and laid it on the coffee table between us. Then I stepped back. Her eyes dropped to the envelope, then back up to me. "What's this?" she asked, already frowning. "Divorce papers." This silence hit hard, like the moment before a storm rolls in. Her mouth parted, disbelief spreading across her face like a crack in glass. "You're serious?" she asked, voice higher now. "You already filed?" I nodded once. "Started the process a couple weeks ago. My lawyer said all it needed was your signature." She took a step back. "You're divorcing me? Just like that?" "No," I said calmly. "Not just like that. After you walked out. After you stayed with another man. After you decided I wasn't worth staying for while you figured yourself out." "That's not fair," she snapped. "You didn't even try to fight for me. You didn't give me a reason to," I said, my voice even. "I'm not a placeholder, Elise. I'm not some bench you sit on while you figure out if you want the ride." Her confidence cracked then. Her arms folded tight across her chest, her chin wobbling just a little. "But we're married," she said, like that alone should have been enough. "We were," I replied. She stared at the envelope like it might catch fire. "You didn't even ask if I was sure. You didn't give us a chance." "I did," I said. "Every day for the past 8 years. I gave this marriage everything. But the second you needed clarity, you ran to someone else. And now that he didn't turn out the way you hoped, you're back like this place is some kind of backup plan." Her voice dropped. "It's not like that." "It is," I said. "And I'm not that man anymore." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. For a moment, she looked like she might cry. I saw her glance toward the box by the stairs, the one with her things I had packed. "You already packed up my stuff," she said quietly. I nodded. She blinked hard. Then she turned toward the envelope again, her fingers brushing the edge like it burned. "I didn't expect this," she said. "I know," I said. "That's the problem." We stood there in silence. Her breathing sharp, mine steady. Finally, she picked up the envelope and held it against her chest. Not clutching, just holding. Like she still didn't know what to do with it. "Goodbye, Elise," I said, walking past her toward the door. She didn't follow. She left 5 minutes later. This time, she closed the door behind her. For the first time in weeks, the silence in the cabin didn't feel empty. It felt like mine. 2 days later, she came back. Not with the calm composure from before. Not with careful words and confident posture. This time, it was all storm. I heard her car before I saw it. Tires spitting gravel, door slamming, hurried footsteps on the porch. She didn't knock. She just walked in like she still had a right. "Nathan," she called, voice high and sharp. "We need to talk." I looked up from my chair. I'd been reading a worn manual from the lab, something about hydraulic tension, anything to keep my mind still. I didn't get up. Just closed the book and set it down beside me. Her hair was messy this time. Her eyes red. No makeup. No plan. "You're really going through with this?" she asked, stepping toward me. "The divorce." "I am," I said, calm as ever. She threw her hands up. "This is insane. It was one mistake, Nathan. One." I didn't respond. "You're seriously going to throw away our entire marriage over a few weeks of confusion?" I stood now slowly. "You didn't just get confused, Elise. You left. You moved in with another man. You said you had feelings for him. And when you were done figuring it out, you came back expecting things to be waiting exactly how you left them." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. "I gave you everything," I continued. "All of me. Years of commitment, trust, a home. I let you chase whatever clarity you needed. But I'm not your backup plan. I'm not the safety net you crawl back to when things get inconvenient." She moved past me, into the living room, pacing now. I was under pressure. I didn't know what I was feeling, and Carter, he seemed like someone I could breathe around. "I got caught up. That's all." "You didn't get caught up," I said. "You made a series of choices. Every one of them without me." She stopped pacing and looked at me, arms tight across her chest. "You're being cold." I nodded. "Yeah, because I'm done playing the part of the patient, understanding husband while you treat our marriage like a hobby." "I didn't cheat on you," she said, voice trembling. "You said so yourself." "That's true," I replied. "You didn't physically cheat. But you emotionally walked away long before you packed a bag. You knew what you were doing, Elise. You knew." She looked around the cabin like she didn't recognize it anymore. Her eyes landed on the missing decorations, the blank walls, the empty bookshelf. The place had been stripped of the touches she once added. "This used to feel like ours," she said quietly. "It stopped feeling like that the day you chose him," I said. She turned back to me, voice rising again. "So that's it? You're not even going to try? After everything?" "I did try." You didn't want it then. Tears welled up now, but I stood still. Not out of cruelty, out of protection. I'd already let her tear through my stability once. I wasn't letting her do it again. She stepped toward me. Don't you remember us? All the plans we made? The life we built? I remember, I said. And I remember being the only one still fighting for it. A pause. Her face twisted, not from sadness, from panic. The loss was sinking in now. The permanence. You'll regret this, she said, voice almost a whisper. You're just hurt. You don't mean it. I walked to the front door and opened it. The wind was picking up outside. Clouds dragging low across the ridge. I meant it when I married you, I said. I meant it when I let you leave without stopping you. And I mean it now. This ends here. She stared at me. Like she couldn't believe I was really doing this. Like I was supposed to crumble. But I didn't. I held the door. She didn't move at first. But then, slowly, she walked out, not defiantly this time. Not like someone in control. She stepped onto the porch and turned around once, eyes glassy, mouth open like she might say something. But nothing came. I closed the door gently. Locked it. Then I leaned against it, breathed in deep, and let the silence settle back into the house. Not as absence, but as peace. The court date landed on a gray Tuesday morning, the kind where the clouds look like they're daring you to pretend it's a normal day. I wore my only suit, navy, barely used, and arrived early, papers in hand. I sat in the hallway outside the hearing room, reading over the same divorce summary I'd already memorized. Elise arrived 10 minutes late, heels clacking down the corridor, a thin scarf looped twice around her neck like armor. She looked polished, composed, but not like herself. Not the woman I married. More like someone trying to dress the part of wronged wife. Her eyes darted toward me, then away. She sat on the opposite bench and didn't say a word. Her lawyer showed up shortly after. A sleek woman in her 40s with a calm voice and a portfolio thicker than mine. They huddled, whispering. I didn't bother listening. My attorney, Joel, was the complete opposite. Early 60s, quiet, dressed like a man who still ironed his own shirts. He nodded at me and gave a small pat on the back. We'd already gone over everything. Inside the courtroom, it went quickly. Elise had tried, of course. She'd filed for temporary support, citing lifestyle changes and abandonment of shared financial structure. But Joel had come prepared. He calmly handed the judge a folder full of statements, timelines, call logs, and most importantly, an affidavit confirming that Elise had voluntarily moved out of the marital home to pursue a relationship with another man. Her lawyer argued back, but the facts were the facts. She had left. She had initiated the pause. And she had stayed gone long enough to make her intentions clear. The judge wasn't cruel, just blunt. Denied most of her financial requests. Granted her a one-time item split, mostly furniture and personal items and nothing else. No spousal support. No continuation of shared accounts. No delay in proceedings. Elise didn't cry in court. She sat stiffly, jaw tight, lips pursed. But I could see the fire in her eyes dimming. Reality was catching up. When the judge finalized the divorce, I felt nothing dramatic. No weight lifted. No triumph. Just closure. A door shut. A chapter ended. Afterward, we stepped into the hallway again. Joel gave me a nod and said he'd be in touch with final documents. Then he walked off, leaving me alone with Elise for the first time in weeks. She walked over, slow and hesitant. No heels now, she'd changed into flats. She looked tired. I didn't think it would end like this, she said softly. I did, I replied, my voice even. She studied me like she was trying to find the man she remembered. I'm sorry, she said after a pause. For how I handled it. For hurting you. I nodded once. I know. She blinked. That's it. What else is there? I said. You made your choices. I made mine. But I still loved you, she whispered. I met her eyes. Maybe. But not enough to stay. Not enough to fight for it when it mattered. She flinched, then looked down at the envelope in her hands. You really won't reconsider? No, I said. Because this isn't about punishing you. It's about protecting myself. She didn't argue. Just nodded slowly, then turned and walked away, her steps quiet this time. No clacking. No confidence. Just a woman walking out of a courthouse without the ending she expected. I watched her go. And then I left, too. No bitterness. No parting words. Just silence. And this time, it felt final. By spring, the snow had melted off the trails and the rumors had reached me. Word around town was that Carter had moved on. Not long after the court hearing, he'd taken a job guiding in Utah, Something about better terrain and better clients. He left without much fanfare, just packed his gear and was gone. No goodbye party. No dramatic farewell. Just a clean break. Elise stayed behind. I didn't see her for a while. The town isn't big, but it's easy enough to avoid someone if you're both trying. I figured she was laying low, maybe staying with her sister in town or renting a short-term place while she figured things out. Then one Saturday afternoon, I ran into her. I was picking up groceries at the co-op, just milk, rice, and a jar of peanut butter. I was in the produce section, inspecting a bag of spinach, when I felt that strange shift in the air. Like something had tilted just slightly. I looked up. She was standing by the apples. Elise. She looked thinner. Not sick. Just hollow. Her clothes hung a little looser, her hair pulled back in a simple knot. No makeup. No jewelry. She was staring at a red delicious like she didn't remember why she was there. And then she saw me. Her face twitched, not quite a smile, not quite a flinch. She lifted a hand halfway, like maybe she thought she should wave. I nodded once. Just a simple acknowledgement. Then I turned back to my basket and walked on. She didn't follow. Didn't call out. Just let it be. And that was all I needed. I drove home, groceries in the back seat, windows cracked to let in the smell of pine. The cabin looked the same as always, the porch swept, a new coat of sealant on the deck. My tools arranged exactly the way I liked. I made tea, sat outside with the mug in my hands, watching the light fade through the trees. The breeze had that clean edge that comes just before sunset, the kind that makes you breathe a little deeper without realizing it. I thought about Elise for a moment, not with anger, not even with regret. Just a soft understanding. She had made her choices. So had I. And whatever version of her I'd loved, whatever plans we made, whatever warmth we once shared, it was done now. Not broken, not ruined, just finished. I took a sip of tea, leaned back in my chair, and listened to the quiet. No more waiting. No more wondering. Just living.